Hey, Masters of the Universe Classics fans, Scott ToyGuru Neitlich here, back with another director's commentary as we go figure by figure in the Mattel Masters of the Universe Classic 6-inch, 7-inch line, or in this case 9-inch figure, and talk about how the figures came to be, how the line came to be. I was the brand manager for about 95% of the line, and today we're talking about this guy, the big yellow gorilla Gygor. This is some fan art I found online. This is not official Mattel art showing He-Man on the back of Gygor, but that wasn't quite the way we cast him in the line, although it does pay homage to how he was originally conceived. And let's kind of get into all this. So for starters, this was the year that we were introducing what we kind of called the Beasts of Burden, where we expanded the line beyond just 6-inch figures. Now, these figures, not only were they bigger than regular characters, like Battle Cat and Titus and Gygor here, they weren't included in the subscription at first. It was really, every time we proved something, we were always trying to push the envelope and go kind of to the next level. So once we had a subscription for basic figures, we introduced Beast. Once those sold well, we included them in the subscription. So for this first year, the Beasts were not part of the subscription. And there was definitely no lack of beasts that we could do. And we did quite a lot of them. There were still a lot that we didn't get to. But part of that is because a lot of the beasts were fully tooled and were very expensive to make. So we had to really look at which ones we could do on an economic scale. Now, there were some fan sites that, as soon as Classics was launched, pitched all these ideas about doing Gygor based on the Gorilla Grodd DC body. But that was not possible because the Gorilla Grodd body belongs to Warner Brothers, to DC, not to Mattel. We sculpted it under their license. You can see a whole video I did about licensed toys and how that works. Also, this brings up an interesting point about why Mattel actually can't take unsolicited submissions, meaning, fan sites sending in direct ideas and saying, do this. If we did that idea, even if the fan site, even if the individual fan, their heart is in the right place, they just want to help the line, Mattel can't accept those ideas because hypothetically that fan that could say, oh, I suggested that idea, now you owe me money. I'm not saying that's what their intent are. A lot of the fans are, intending to help out, but that's the reason Mattel doesn't take unsolicited ideas. You have to go through things like inventor relations, if you will. If you have an idea for a Mattel product or modifying a Mattel product, there's a whole legal way to go through that through the My Mattel Ideas or Inventor Relations portal on their website. You can't just send ideas into Mattel, even if your heart's in the right place. So either way, the idea of doing Gygor was something we did generate, if you will, on our own, especially because we knew investing in a new tool, which Gygor was a fully tooled figure. You can see the tooling model here, unpainted. There was going to be payoff, meaning we knew we could get at least 2 characters, if not maybe 3 or 4 out of it. So the second one being the Shadow Beast. So in essence, Shadow Beast was planned when Gygor was planned. We knew we were going to do Shadow Beast, much like we knew we were going to try to do Megator and Panther using the tall, giant person and cat bucks, if you will. It was always the intent in year 1 to build those bucks, the gorilla, the tall giant, and the cat, so that in year 2 we could pay that off with sort of a free figure with no tooling or minimal tooling as a refresh. So that was always the idea from day 1, and we were never going to use the Gorilla Grodd body again because that was owned by Warner Brothers and was not possible, despite some fan sites suggesting it. And, it's always appreciated, but again, anytime I got ideas from fans like that, I wasn't allowed to take them for legal reasons, and you could understand that, Mattel's policy. So, doing a giant yellow gorilla, not only was this just a cool thing that really added sort of breadth and height and bigness to the line, because now you could have these giant characters, but he was also really not just a nod, but it was a direct, reimagining of original concepts from the vintage line that never made it into the line. So let's go back in time and talk about that. Gygor actually had multiple concepts, 2 major ones. The first one you see here, the kind of, red version of Gygor, which I think some people thought this was originally designed to be an early version of Beastman, since he's got the red color, even though the belt is different and the gauntlets. But you can see from other concept art that no, it was meant to be a larger gorilla with the idea that He-Man was going to ride around on his back. Hence that original fan art in the very first or second image of this video. So this was one of the concepts for Gygor, where he was going to be a ride-on for He-Man. But it wasn't the only one that was tinkered around with as the line was designed. The other was doing a yellow version of the gorilla with a big battle axe and black armor. And this was the one that we wound up going with, although I have to say the idea was we were hoping to get to the red version as the ride-on in time too, again to pay off the gorilla buck. We never got to that version, but it was something discussed. So where did this gorilla come from? That is answered, as many MOTU questions are, by the Big Jim line. So this was Mattel's line from the 70s of action figures, and a lot of people know that Battle Cat and Panther came from this line. It was the On the Tiger Trail set. And there were other things that came from the Big Jim line too, direct and indirect, that definitely had an influence on Masters of the Universe. You can actually see more about that. I did a whole video about how Big Jim influenced the original designs for He-Man, but both directly as repaints and indirectly as concepts that designers were working on. But as far as direct repaints, yeah, the big one was definitely Battle Cat and Panther, which came right from the Big Jim on the Tiger Trail, which was a tiger and a cage. And that, although that actually was originally a Jungle Cat from the Tarzan line. So while the Big Jim Tiger gets a lot of the credit, the Jungle Cat, that I think it was a panther, not Panther, that came with Tarzan, that actually predated the use of the tool in Big Jim. So it goes back even farther into Mattel legacy. But going back to Big Jim, there were other creatures that wound up in the MOTU line that Big Jim supplied. Another big one being the eagle from the Big Jim Eagle set, which came with a new pair of pants, shirt, and arm rest for the eagle, as well as the eagle itself. And this eagle, of course, is well known in Masters of the Universe lore because it became both Zor and Screech, which later on in Masters of the Universe Classics, Zor and Screech's eagle form was actually used quite a lot in a lot of toy lines, since it was a Mattel tool owned by Mattel, as opposed to one that was a licensed tool like Gorilla Grodd was with DC. Now, there were other animals in Big Jim, like crocodiles and wolves and gorillas, and essentially the early designers were scouring this line for existing tooling, because tooling is very expensive. I mean, in today's market, it's $20,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 for a fully tooled figure. And one that definitely rose to the top of the heap was the Big Jim Gorilla, which here it is in the package. I was actually able to get one of these from the archive at Mattel when we were doing the design work for Gygor, and was able to actually get it to the Four Horsemen. So they actually had it in hand when they were sculpting him. I remember I had to go through a whole thing where I had to check it out from the archive and then get permission to mail it. And I mean, there's a whole thing when you do that. But it was worth it because you want to give the Horsemen everything they can. Originally, he was scaled, as you see here, to a Big Jim figure. But with Masters of the Universe, he would have been much like Battle Cat, kind of a giant character that would have dwarfed the regular 5-inch figures. I mean, he wasn't that huge, but he was definitely bigger than a 5-inch figure. I think he came out to like 7 inches, I want to say. And, limited articulation, but he did have, could raise his arms, and he came with a little net catapult you would use for capturing the gorilla, because, that was days before Greenpeace, when capturing tigers in cages and gorillas in nets was a fun pastime for toys. And, hey, modern PC doesn't always work with 1970s toys. So you can see the MOTU Classics Gygor next to the gorilla from Big Jim that inspired him, and how the Horsemen were able to take this tool and then reimagine it in the Classics scale and articulation level, and then again in the colors that the gorilla would have been repainted, much like Battle Cat was repainted from the tiger, which was repainted from the panther. So, that's a lot of repainting. And here he is in his brand new package. We had to design an all-new package for Gygor because he was a different shape and a different not scale, I mean, he was 6-inch scale, but he was bigger than a regular 6-inch figure. I think he came out to 9 inches, I want to say. I don't have him in front of me to measure. But he had a brand new box, and that meant, actually getting a little design work from the packaging group that had to create a new structure. But we tried to keep it as simple as possible with the same kind of cross-sell and the same kind of bio to minimize the amount of work, because you always wanted to kind of do that when you were doing toy lines, fly by night like this. Gygor also, his bio is interesting. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the first mention of Ular, the jungle He-Man, which eventually didn't get released until my last year, I think, which was like 2015 online. But we always intended for this action figure to be made, and getting to him was so cool. And sort of leaving those little breadcrumbs toward, with the goal of getting to him on the bios was always kind of part of the fun. And also on the Vicron San Diego Comic-Con bio, there's more mentions about Gygor and them fighting in the arena of Cholo, which came from the DC Masters of the Universe comics, where Beastman is always talking about the beard of Cholo. And Terry Higuchi, all on his own, because he's such a great guy, did this piece of art just for fun of Vicron fighting Gygor in Cholo's arena. And you could see Cholo up there on the throne with his very long beard. That was just, that came out of Terry's imagination. He just did this for fun, but it's one of my favorite pieces of MOTU art, because you can tell a lot of love went into it, as did Gygor. So that's a long way to come from a concept created from a big gym toy, repainted for the vintage Masters of the Universe line that never made it to production, and then was reimagined in the MOTU Classics line. And that's what Classics was really all about, was doing figures like this. And I'm really glad we got to Gygor, and early in the line, not just because he gave us the giant gorilla buck that got reused as the Shadow Beasts, etc., but he's a fun figure. That's what MOTU Classics was all about. Paying homage, having fun, and making He-Man fans happy.